What is the connection between Doctor Strange, Aleister Crowley, God the Creator, Satanism, and the ancient heresy of Gnosticism? To truly understand the nature and the context of the spiritual side of Marvel cosmology, one needs to understand the heresy of ancient Gnosticism. The core of Gnosticism is based on the Antichrist inversion of good and evil. Leading ancient Gnostics like the Valentinians inverted the creation event, claiming that Yahweh, the Creator God, was evil, and therefore the resulting creation and all matter was also evil. They taught that the human race was imprisoned by Yahweh in evil human bodies. They taught that when Satan deceived Eve and told her that she could become God by partaking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that it was really a good thing, and that it really wasn't Satan but the goddess Sophia who used the serpent to instruct Eve. Satan, through Gnosticism, became the savior, and God became the devil. Through this cosmic shell game, Satan was able to deceive Gnostics through mass Gnostic inversion, effectively turning God into the devil and the devil into the savior. It should not be a surprise then that Marvel and its Crowleyan writers have not only repeatedly promoted Gnostic themes, but that the creation or recreation of the universe portrays the Judeo-Christian creator of the universe as evil, and Satanist Aleister Crowley, in the form of Doctor Strange, as heroic.
So as we see the cosmology of Gnosticism unfold, we get the understanding that it's a total inversion. God is made to look like Satan, Satan is made to look like God, and so forth. And the coming section that you're going to see is going to thoroughly blow your mind, because you're going to find out that the creator of the Marvel Universe is a being by the name of Sisoneg, and he's an evil entity. And there's a lot that will be said about him. But you need to understand this, is Sisoneg is a being who was created by a writer by the name of Steve Englehart. But it's interesting because he's made to be the creator of Earth and the universe and so forth, which is actually a recreation. And Sisoneg is made to be evil. Well, guess what? Steve Englehart was a follower of the Satanist Aleister Crowley when he wrote this. And Crowley would have what he called the Gnostic Mass and so forth. And Englehart, we'll have a lot to say about, was basically portraying God as evil. But guess who the hero was who was trying to stop him? It was Doctor Strange. And you're going to find out that Doctor Strange, there's been a couple of movies on him now, you're going to see that Doctor Strange is made in the image of Satanist Aleister Crowley. And he's portrayed as the good guy. So as you view this, keep all this in mind and understand who and how bad and how wicked Aleister Crowley was. He was most highly regarded Satanist of the last century. He talked about over and over again sacrificing children to Satan. He said, I wanted to get in touch with Satan personally and become his chief of staff. He was a Satanist organizer. But what's fascinating about this that you need to keep in mind is that the one true God has said all this would happen. He's prophesied it. He's ultimately in control. The Bible says, greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. That if God be for us, who could be against us? That we're more than conquerors through Christ who strengthens us. That we ultimately have the victory in him. And that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord in the end. So keep that in mind as you're watching this, because you're looking at the underbelly and the armpit of Satan's kingdom as he deceives the world. Brace yourself, because you're going to see that a follower of Aleister Crowley at the time was creating Sisoneg, the creator of the Marvel Universe. And you're going to see he's aligned with God. He's basically there's a line between him and Yahweh, who's made to look evil, whereas Satan is made to look great.
Incredibly, Marvel depicts God, the Creator, as an evil sorcerer, the enemy of humanity who must be opposed. He is first identified as a 31st century sorcerer named Sisoneg, who greedily desires the power of all other magical beings. Since Sisoneg has the ability to time travel and absorb the magical powers of other beings, he travels back through the centuries and robs each sorcerer of his power along the way. The supreme sorcerer, Doctor Strange, travels back in time following Sisoneg, trying unsuccessfully to prohibit Sisoneg at every stop from absorbing everyone else's power and becoming God. Sisoneg finally ventures all the way to the very dawn of creation and recreates the universe, becoming the God of the mainstream 616 Marvel Universe. In his mission to become God, Sisoneg declares, "And once I become God, the universe and beyond shall be mine, to do with as I will. Everything will be reborn as I desire it."
By recreating the entire mainstream 616 Marvel universe and having power even beyond it, as he states, he will also be God of the Marvel Omniverse, which expands from the foundational Marvel multiverse. Now, having become God and existing before the creation of all things, Siseneg states, "I have achieved my godhood." Siseneg, who is described by the writer as possessing all extant power and as having absorbed all power through all timelines, then recreates the entirety of the Marvel Universe, declaring, "Time turns and begins again with me. When you remember this, think not of the man called Siseneg, but the God called Genesis." The name Genesis, of course, is an obvious reference to the first book of the Hebrew and Christian Bible, which records the creation account, known as Genesis. Doctor Strange is now shown wondering whether Siseneg has recreated the universe all over again for the second time, or if he simply repeated the first creation. However, this is where even more blatant references to the biblical God come into play. Even before Siseneg's recreation of the universe, he leaves his mark on the universe and planet Earth in such a way that he is obviously being portrayed as a biblical God of creation. Here we see that Marvel works in the biblical narrative of the biblical cities Sodom and Gomorrah. Here we see Siseneg desiring to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah for what he calls their, quote, sin and degradation. In fact, we read in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, "Then the Lord said, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave." Under the backdrop of what is portrayed as Siseneg's unmerciful character, Doctor Strange is made to look like a compassionate good guy. Doctor Strange pleads with Siseneg not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, claiming that their sin isn't really that bad and that he doesn't really know them. Nevertheless, in the next panels, we see that Siseneg is destroying Sodom and Gomorrah with fire and brimstone. The biblical book of Genesis states in chapter 19 that, quote, "Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens." We also read in Genesis chapter 19 that Lot and his family escaped, but Lot's wife looked back and was destroyed by the Lord. In Marvel's Gnostic version of the story, the parallels are absolutely undeniable, as we see Lot and his family in the first panel escaping the judgment, with Lot warning his wife in the next panel, "Do not look back, wife. We must put our time of wickedness from our minds." Then we also see Siseneg create an Eden-like garden with two ape-like hominids, which are supposed to be Adam and Eve. Note the apple in the lower right side of the panel. Marvel's Steve Englehart, who authored this evil, Gnostic version of the creation account, is twisting the one true God, the righteous and loving, uncreated creator of all things, into an evil, power-hungry sorcerer who became God.
How could Steve Englehart so twist the truth about who God is? Believe it or not, as we shall see, Englehart had been a disciple of Satanist Aleister Crowley and even a member of his satanic cult known as Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. When Marvel's Stan Lee, the executive vice president and publisher of Marvel Comics, read the wicked narrative that depicted the one true God, the creator, as evil, and worried about the public outcry over such an obvious attack on God, he demanded that the writer Steve Englehart and comic artist Frank Brunner do an immediate retraction. However, Brunner later acknowledged that he and Englehart flat out lied to Lee and wrote a fake fan letter from a fake minister praising the comic, trying to demonstrate to Lee that it would be acceptable to publicly condemn God. Frank Brunner admitted when the book came out, Stan Lee finally got hold of it. And I don't know, somebody pointed it out or he read it and he wrote us a letter saying, "We can't do God. You're going to have to print in the letters column a retraction saying that this is not the God, this is just a God." Steve and I said, "Oh, come on, this is the whole point of the story. If we did that retraction of God, this is meaningless." So Steve happened to be on his way to Texas for something. This is when we were in California, and we cooked up this plot. We wrote a letter from a Reverend Billingsley in Texas, a fictional person, saying that one of the children in his parish brought him the comic book, and he was astounded and thrilled by it. And he said, "Wow, this is the best comic book I've ever read." And we signed it, Reverend so-and-so, Austin, Texas. And when Steve was in Texas, he mailed the letter so it had the proper postmark. Then we got a phone call from Roy, and he said, "Hey, about that retraction, I'm going to send you a letter, and instead of the retraction, I want you to print this letter." And it was our letter. We printed our letter. It shouldn't be too much of a shock that two admitted liars and deceivers in Englehart and Brunner not only deceived Stan Lee and the public by printing a fake fan letter from a fake pastor praising the comic that portrayed God as evil, but that they portrayed the sorcerer, Doctor Strange, as the good guy who really just wanted to save humanity from God. Now, folks, this makes sense because guess what? Both Steve Englehart and Frank Brunner were heavily influenced by the Satanist Aleister Crowley. When Brenner was asked about his collaboration with Steve Englehart on Doctor Strange and whether or not the occult may have influenced them, Brenner admitted, "Yes, I was already studying the occult in a general sort of way, both the old stuff, including Aleister Crowley and the Golden Dawn Society, which is an occult secret society to which Crowley once belonged." He goes on to say, to modern books like Real Magic by P.I.E., Bone Wits, and the writings of Carlos Castaneda, who also, by the way, was influenced by Satanist Aleister Crowley. Incredibly, Englehart, who not only wrote much of Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, Captain America, the Hulk, and the Avengers, not only became a member of Crowley's satanic sex cult, still known today as Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, but also even became one of their ambassadors. As you can see, he was already quite the ambassador for Crowley and his teachings to countless children through Doctor Strange and the comics. Note that in one of Crowley's OTO organization's newsletters, Steve Englehart is dubbed as the ambassador in Europe. The OTO newsletter also states that Englehart was received at Boleskine by the caretaker, which was the former home of Aleister Crowley, overlooking Loch Ness in Scotland. It further states, quote, he was able to see many of the rooms used by Crowley. And if it couldn't get any stranger, folks, here we see an OTO letter addressed to guitarist Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest guitarists and biggest bands of all time, where the OTO and Englehart, their ambassador, are requesting permission to hold meetings in Crowley's Boleskine house, which Page had just purchased. Note that the letter begins with Crowley's satanic maxim, "Do what thou wilt." Page himself, an enthusiastic disciple of the teachings of Aleister Crowley, who put his magic into practice and became a huge guitarist, bought much of Crowley's occult paraphernalia and purchased his house overlooking Loch Ness in 1970. Note that Aleister Crowley's satanic credo was also placed by Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin on the runoff matrix of their album Led Zeppelin III. Here we see Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin in the movie Lucifer Rising, produced by the co-founder of the Church of Satan, Crowley and Satanist Kenneth Anger, with Page glorifying Crowley as one of his many disciples. Just a few quick examples of the world's most influential musicians will help you understand the vastness of this programming and how the prominent Crowleyan lies via popular superheroes is part and parcel of a far larger satanic campaign also being ushered in by the world's most popular rock and pop gods. Concerts are often satanic worship. The most successful band of all time also promoted Crowley's satanic maxim, with John Lennon stating, quote, "The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, do what thou willst, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody." And here we see the Beatles even placed Aleister Crowley, the admitted devil worshipper, on their album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The Rolling Stones, one of the top 3 bands of all time along with the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, also channeled music from demons and sang Sympathy for the Devil, and worked with Crowleyan Satanist and filmmaker Kenneth Anger on their album Their Satanic Majesty's Request. Here we see Jim Morrison of The Doors, who were the most successful American rock band of the counterculture hippie revolution, huddled around a bust of Aleister Crowley. Steven Tyler, the frontman of Aerosmith, known by millennials and Generation Xers for his time on American Idol, revealed in his autobiography that Aerosmith, after The Doors, became the biggest American band as a result of his applying the ritualistic sex magic of Satanist Aleister Crowley. Tyler stated, "I've practiced Crowley's magic, so I know it works," and that his personal objective was, quote, namely, that Aerosmith would become the greatest American band. But at what cost? Bruce Dickinson, frontman of Iron Maiden, which is often ranked as the greatest heavy metal band of all time, encouraged his young impressionable fans to take the mark of the Antichrist or the Beast prophesied in the book of Revelation by singing 666, the number of the beast, 666, the one for you and me. 666, the number of the beast, 666, the one for you and me. Bruce Dickinson also admitted that his song Man of Sorrows is about Satanist Aleister Crowley and his desire to become the Antichrist ever since he was a child.
Trapped inside a body, made to feel only guilt and shame. His anger all his life, I hate myself, he cried. Do what thou wilt, do what thou wilt, he cried.
Dickinson admitted Man of Sorrows was about the young Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley is a boy, and what kind of feelings turn a 12-year-old boy into basically what inspires a 12-year-old boy to make a life choice. Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be the Antichrist. Even many of the top rappers, like Jay-Z, the most successful rapper ever, talks about how he asks spirits to come into his body.
I get possessed by the spirits.
And praises Satan in his song Lucifer, Son of the Morning. And here we see Jay-Z wearing a shirt promoting Crowley's satanic destructive philosophy of do what thou wilt. It's undeniable, which we have seen, whether it's actors like Robert Downey Jr. in part 1 of this series, or rock artists and pop artists and hip-hop artists who have sold their souls to Satan for power are influencing countless young people. Jesus warned that it would be better that a large millstone be hung around their necks and they be thrown into the depths of the sea than the judgment that they will face from God. Jesus also warned, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? However, as we've been seeing, it's not only these popular music artists that are relying on satanic power for fame and money, but we also see Crowley Satanism being practiced in the popular world of comics. Consider the fact that Sisoneg is Genesis spelled backwards. Crowley instructed his adept disciples, like Engelhardt in Crowley's book Magic in Theory and Practice, let him learn to write backwards with either hand. In Marvel's Silver Surfer number 10, volume 3, Stephen Engelhardt puts Crowley's teachings in the mouth of Galactus. Every man and every woman is a star. When Steve Engelhardt later worked on DC's sorceress, Madame Xanadu, in Dance for Two Demons, he had the sorceress wielding tarot cards that appear to be modeled on Aleister Crowley's tarot deck. Incredibly, Marvel's Stephen Engelhardt even appeared on a podcast that promotes Satanist Aleister Crowley's magic called Thelema Now, Crowley Ritual and Magic.